G'day everybody, Dean Sweetman here along with Frank Barry, getting ready for another great show. Frank, how you doing today?
Yeah, doing awesome. Super excited about today. Money in marriage is a great topic.
It's a big deal, maybe the biggest deal inside of marriage. So we've got a couple of awesome guests. We've got Clayton and Ashlee Hurst from Lakewood Church. Hey guys, good to meet you.
Hello.
Hey, thanks so much for having us.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having us.
So good to have you guys on the show.
Absolutely. You guys have written a book about this subject, Hope for Your Marriage, came out a little while ago. And, you know, if it's anything like me, sometimes you just get perceived as the expert on things. And so, but I'm sure you got so much to share with us today in this really, really important topic. You guys have been at Lakewood Church for a long time now, and you serve as the marriage and parenting pastors. Can you tell us a little bit about that role and what you guys do kind of day to day in the church?
And maybe your journey there too. It'd be great to hear.
Yeah, for sure. You know, we both grew up in church, and before coming here, I was a children's pastor at a church in East Texas, and we felt like God was calling us down here, and I got involved in children's ministry, and Ashlee worked in media for a number of years. And about almost 5 years ago, Pastor Joel and the leadership of the church really felt like, you know, we need somebody that's specifically looking into and trying to take care of our married couples, just trying to offer some different tools and resources. And so we started doing that. We've been here for almost a little over 14 years.
Wow.
And been married for 23 years this summer.
It'll be 24 this summer.
24 this summer.
Yeah.
And have 3 kids, and just love being a part of the church, love helping couples.
Yeah.
And this is obviously a huge topic in marriages.
Yeah, it's the number one prayer need at our church. We have prayer time at every service here at Lakewood Church during the service, where people can come down front all over the place. We have prayer partners. And so the person over our prayer department did a survey not too long ago, and we found out that marriage is actually the number one prayer need at our church. And we feel like we're not alone. We feel like it's probably the number one prayer need in most churches. And, you know, I know we're going to be talking about finances today, and of course that plays a big role in that, communication. But anyway, so we do a lot for marriages at our church. We feel like it's extremely important. We have marriage classes every weekend. We have 3 different marriage classes ongoing. We have 3 premarital classes every week that are 8-week courses, training, getting people prepared for marriage. And we have marriage life groups. We just had a marriage retreat last weekend where we had about 300 people there. It's for us, and that sounds like a lot for us. We always say that it was a little bit smaller, intimate, but I guess that is a big number.
Yeah, that's
because we have a marriage
bigger than most
conference.
churches, right?
Right. And it's funny. I know it's kind of ironic to say that, but we have a marriage conference in August, and we have about 7,000 that come to that. Wow. So for us, this one's smaller and easier to manage, but still, it's just, I guess we say it's more intimate because there's more one-on-one time at our retreat.
But everywhere across the board, marriage and finances is always, you know, top 1 or 2 issues that come up in every marriage, every counseling session that we talk with.
Yeah.
Wow.
Love it.
So I guess that's what led to writing the book.
Well, you know, we were approached to write the book.
Yeah.
And, we felt like, you know what, we're not really experts, but all we have is our story. And so the first 5 years of our marriage, we kind of found ourselves in almost a valley of hopelessness. We grew up in great families, both in Christian homes, great marriage legacy across the board. And we just kind of assumed that we would have it all together and knew all the answers to all the questions. And what we realized is that we were preparing for the wedding day, but we weren't preparing for all the days that were to come. And so it was kind of a slow descent, you know, and what we write in the book, it was kind of a slow descent into this valley of hopelessness. And we dealt with everything from communication to finances, intimacy issues across the board. And because we really didn't have the tools that we need to have a successful marriage.
Yeah, I mean, we spent most of our work on our relationship was done before we were married because we were trying to woo each other, you know, and we went to one premarital counseling appointment, I think, and we were like, we've got this. Our parents have been married forever. We grew up in church. This is no big deal. We'll be fine. We love going out on dates. No problem. But, slowly we have some funny stories of things that happened between us at the beginning were just funny things of differences we had between each other. Like, for instance, to save on time.
Things that I did wrong.
Yeah, save on time.
Right.
He decided he wanted to get a 55-gallon trash can to put in the middle of our very, very, very tiny kitchen. So he would only have to take the trash out like once every other week, I guess.
Typical man.
Yeah. Did it in college. Thought it would work for us.
Logical husband move for sure. Very efficient.
Yeah. So we had a lot of different funny things, but then it just slowly turned into a really bad place in our marriage, and we needed help. We were really good at putting on masks and pretending like everything was okay. If you were probably to ask anybody during that time, they would probably say no. I had no idea that they were having any issues at all. And so,
we were on a church staff at a different church for about 3 of those years. And so we were really great at putting on masks. And in fact, couples would come to me for marriage advice. I was really great at telling somebody else how to have a great marriage. I just wasn't willing to apply it to myself. And I think that was the turning point. It's actually the first line in our book is God kind of just spoke to my heart and said, are you willing to do whatever it takes to have the marriage that you've always hoped and dreamed of? And that was really a breaking point for me. I think I came home and talked to Ashlee and said, listen, I know what we've been doing hasn't been working, but I'm willing if you're willing. And that was really the beginning of kind of coming out of that valley. And we talk about that in the book.
Yeah. Was it challenging to write a book together? So you were approached, you guys, I'm sure, started sorting through that and figured out. And then, talked a little bit about writing it together.
Yeah, we were kind of different than most people that write books. Most people that write books are actually pursuing to write a book.
Right.
Usually, and for us, we were approached. And so, like Clayton said, our first response was, we're not authors. We don't have degrees in counseling. Why would you want us to write this book? But the more we prayed about it, we just really felt like we had a story to tell. And we've found that it's not really a unique story. It's more of a common story of just disagreement, miscommunication, and just finding ourselves in that valley. And so for us writing the book, there were challenging parts to it just because we were newbies and we didn't really know what we were doing. But it was very therapeutic for us. We had to talk about things that we hadn't talked about in a long time. And we realized, honestly, in some places there was a little bit of hurt still there. There was still some healing that needed to happen in some areas. Sure. There was still healing from our childhood that we really hadn't delved into much that we needed to talk through. And so honestly, we tell people now, we're like, if you really want to work on your marriage, write a book. Because it's so helpful, because you really have to unpack. I mean, we had to unpack everything. The last 22 years in a book, and it really helped us to walk through some things again. And it was very healing.
Yeah. And you had, obviously the book's on marriage and finances. So for couples that are really struggling with their finances, whether they're, 6 months in or 20 years in, what's maybe the one thing or the big thing that you like to get them all to learn early on and the rule to follow?
I think the number one issue, or the number one thing that we try to tell them, is to be as vulnerable as possible. And that will help not only in finances, it'll help in communication across the board. And ultimately, we find the number one issue, you've got the big three. You've got finances, you've got intimacy and communication. But really the number one, if you boil those things down, it really comes down to pride. Because when you're willing to lay down your pride and admit, I need some help, or I need to deal with this, it really kind of removes the walls between you and your spouse. And you realize that, she's not on the opposing team. She's on the same team. So if she wins, I win. But if she loses, I lose. Right. So we try to help couples to not only get to that place of vulnerability, but also, practical things of filling out a budget and getting on the same page when it comes to finances. There's been seasons in our life, in our married life, where we've stuck to a budget. We've been on a budget, different types of budgets at different seasons. And it's funny, whenever we're on a budget, things are great. But as soon as we get, things go crazy.
Yeah.
And it's just one of those, it's so simple, it's hard type of issues in marriage. I think that's what we try to encourage couples to just the little things. Even, one of the things that we talk about is how you were brought up, kind of your normal, especially as young couples are waiting longer and longer to get married into their mid-20s or late 20s or beyond. You've had a number of years where you had this normal in your life, and then your spouse now has this normal. Now you're merging together. And so just like in you get out on the freeway, you try to merge into some traffic. If there's not a yielding to each other, there's going to be a crash. And so you have to yield to each other. You have to lay that pride down whenever you're working with finances or any other issue in marriage.
That's awesome.
So good.
Finances up, like you said, the top three, right? And all the surveys say that too, that the money thing. What do you think it is about money inside a marriage that is, causes so many problems for people? Like specifically, what have you guys seen in your experience and your research why is the money thing so divisive and so, brings so much hurt?
I think it goes back to what Clayton was just saying. I mean, every example I can think of in my head of couples we've talked to, it all boils down to pride. We've talked to couples where they're not willing to share bank accounts. Well, why aren't you willing to share bank account? Well, because I earn this money. It's my money.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. That's like such a common one, right? At the beginning, you're like, why won't you share a bank account? It's the craziest thing.
Yeah. We just talked to a couple of weeks ago that they were like, no, we're not going to share bank accounts. And so anytime we talk to couples, regardless of what we're talking to them about, we always start with that question that Clayton said earlier that the Lord impressed on his heart. Are you willing to do whatever it takes to have the marriage you've always hoped and dreamed of? If your answer is no, then there's probably not much we can do to help you. But if your answer is yes, great, let's keep talking. Well, they usually always say yes. Well, once we start talking, say we have the different bank accounts. Well, this is my money. I wanted to, and then we bring that question back up. Okay, well, this is an area where you probably need to humble yourself a little bit, maybe give a little bit and take a little bit and come up with this budget and come together because you told us you were willing to do whatever it takes to have the marriage you always hoped and dreamed of. And that takes sacrifice. That takes willing to give up some things that you've held tightly to and you feel like are yours. You know what? None of it's yours. It's all God's. And we make sure they know that too. Everything you have is the Lord's. It's not yours. So why are you holding on to it so tightly? And then, break that down. It could be a plethora of things. It could be things from their past or I don't know.
Yeah, and I think it also kind of dovetails into the number one need of most men is honor and respect. The number one need of most women is love and security. Mm-hmm. So if you're not communicating with each other in your finances, it could come across as disrespectful to a man, and it could come across as shaking your wife's security to her very core.
Yeah.
So you've got to be at that place to where you're willing to lay down, what you think is right for the betterment of your, of your marriage.
Yeah.
Yeah. The bank account thing together is such because it brings light into your spending habits. And, if you're not willing to do that, often that's probably an indicator that you're hiding something and you don't want to kind of bring the light into that whole spending habit thing. And I can see that right there is, that's a big pressure point for couples that don't want to do the finances joint together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's when you get to that place of vulnerability, when you're willing to expose yourself. Like you said, we've got some dear friends that they faced this about 3 or 4 years ago. And because he was dealing with some pride and probably some, just kind of
shame, he had gotten them into a place where they were really struggling financially. He'd made some poor decisions in their finances that she didn't know about. And so instead of being open about it, he hid it. Yeah. And
that caused the huge, obviously, disconnect with each other, and so they had to get back to the place of vulnerability and just saying, what, here's what happened. Here's what I've done. I've messed up. Do you forgive me? And really trying to get to that place of exposure so that you can move forward.
Mm-hmm. Awesome.
Yeah. I mean, I even know it from my own marriage, me and my wife, like she feels a great sense of security when, the budget is in place. And we're sticking to the budget and we're both aware of exactly where we're at. As soon as it feels like something, even though we share a bank account, we have the budget. If something feels like, oh, we're late on paying something or something's coming up, like as soon as there's any sort of unstable feelings going on that she feels, she gets really, it worries her, right? Then it starts weighing on her, right? So I have to be really good at, keeping great communication with her. And it's like ebbs and flows to our marriage, right? Where sometimes we're doing really good, and then, we start falling off the rails on the budget, and then it gets worse, and then we got to get back in. And so it's just kind of an up and down thing. So, kind of the common things you were mentioning definitely apply to us.
Yeah. And I love that you're saying that too, because we talk to so many couples. One of the first things we go over with couples is to understand the number one need of a man and a woman, and how important security is for a woman. I feel like a lot of times men don't really understand that. Some men might see you having to reassure her as her kind of like, well, why isn't she getting it? Why does she keep nagging you about it? Why can't she just understand? Why do you have to say it more than once that everything's okay? Well, it's because our number one need is security. We constantly need to know that everything's going to be okay. The finances are good. Yeah. Let's talk about this. It can't be a one-time talk of everything's fine. I've got it. Don't worry about it. No, it's like a weekly thing. Okay, where are we at now with the budget? How have we done with our spending? Where's this going? How are we looking right now? That's every time we talk about that in front of an audience, all the women in the audience are going, yep. Every woman is shaking their head, because security is I told Clayton, security is as important as me breathing air. That's how important security is to me. And I believe every woman. So.
Yeah. Well, you talk about some of the non-negotiables, and I think maybe the one bank account, maybe the budget, but what are some of these other non-negotiable things that come into play as it relates to finances destroying a marriage?
Mm-hmm. Well, we were just talking about this the other day, and we've really set this into motion really late, but we should have done it sooner, is how much is too much to spend without the other spouse knowing?
Very good.
And that's something we've really been talking about lately is, let's set that limit of, okay, is it $20? Are you okay with me spending $20 or $30 without me talking to you first? What is the amount that you need to talk to your spouse about that they're going to get upset about? And I think that's an amount you should both agree on and set non-negotiable. If it costs more than X amount of dollars, we're going to talk about this before we spend any money.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times we even go below that, because there's times to where she needs to go grab something, or I need to go grab something, and it's more out of courtesy and out of the love that you have for each other to shoot a text or pick up the phone and say, hey, I was going to go grab this. Are you good with that? And it's not a question of asking permission, but it's helping each other realize is that this is our money that God's entrusted us. And so how can we navigate through this together? And ultimately there's no small denomination, and so whatever limit that you place on it, you realize that, okay, I'm going to, out of the respect for my spouse, I'm going to make sure that we're both on the same page before we move forward with this. And it makes a huge impact on them.
So good. Just maybe we're talking about and sometimes you develop habits inside the marriage that then, you need that kind of instruction that you guys bring. If there were some couples who were engaged listening, and so they haven't got the chance yet to create some bad habits, right? What would be a couple things that you would advise, younger people potentially getting married on this whole area of talking about money?
Stay away from debt of any kind as much as possible. The free T-shirt that you got in college whenever you signed up for the credit card,
that was me.
Don't do it.
Burn it.
Yeah, me too.
Me too.
I think that's huge. I think it always goes back to communicating, with what was normal for them. We had a couple that I just married a couple of years ago, and before they got married, they were newlyweds, and they needed to come over and talk. And because it was almost like a deal breaker for her, because how he dealt with money and how she dealt with money growing up were completely different. And the differences were, she was brought up in a home that you either use cash or a debit card. And he was brought up in a home to where he had a credit card that he put everything on, but then he paid it off at the end of the month, to where he never carried a balance. That's just how he was brought up to do it. Yeah. And I said, well, you know what? He's not carrying a balance and anything like that. I said, y'all need to come to an agreement to where this was his normal, this was your normal, but what's going to be your normal? And because it was almost to the place of they were looking at the same issue, but they were looking at it from different ends of the binoculars. She was looking at it from in and he was looking at it from the other. So I think for young couples, it's having that understanding prior to going into marriage of, okay, who's going to pay the bills? How are we going to talk about this? How are we going to process when we get paid? What's that look like? You know, there's something that we do with every couple that we marry is go through assessment test that a great ministry puts out, that we basically ask a lot of those questions, and they seem really, really simple. But it's kind of what we go back to is that, you know what, we prepared so much for the wedding day. We didn't think about all the days that were going to slap us in the face right after the do. Right. You know, so having that plan in place really takes the emotions out. It really takes the guessing out when you can have those plans in place for day one as soon as you get married.
Yeah. And I was going to say, too, get into premarital counseling, go to a church that has premarital counseling and make sure it includes a lesson on finances and really take that to heart. Like he said, that assessment's so good that we have couples take. I mean, it really breaks things down. I mean, as far as like, who's going to mow the yard? I mean, it really talks about, I mean, it goes really
who's
detail by
toilets,
detail.
Who's mowing the yard, who's doing the budget.
Yes.
And it also is great because it says, who did this for you in your family? Was it your mom? Was it your dad? Who modeled it to you? And now who's going to do it whenever you get married? So.
Yeah. And it also identifies, okay, are you the saver or the spender? Because a lot of times in marriages, one person's the saver and one person's the spender.
Very true.
Yeah.
Right. And so how are you guys going to make this work? You know, you've got to compromise. Pride comes into play there again, because sometimes you get really prideful on, well, this is how I've always done it. You know, okay, well, there's got to be some compromise. And then, of course, we talk to them about making out the budget as well. But my number one thing for anybody that's engaged is to absolutely go through premarital counseling that also has a lesson or two on finances.
That's awesome. But I might be old-fashioned. I might be old-fashioned, but I hope the wives aren't mowing the lawn.
Well, and I mean, man, I was the one with the credit card debt from college, the free T-shirt for sure, and my wife, just for whatever reasons, came from a great family, did well with their finances, but she didn't learn about like writing checks. She actually had to go to check writing school because of how many like bounced checks she wrote. And so we had the funniest situation. We had debt, school debt, student loans, all this kind of stuff that we had to work through. But it was a good lesson, right? And having people around to help us through it was major. So
I had a professor in college who was a math professor, genius. But I walked in one day to get some help, and he was balancing his checkbook, and he had messed up. And I'm like, you're a mathematical genius. How is this possible? So it happens to the best of us, you know?
Money does weird things to people. That's right. What, like kind of a, maybe a little bit of an offshoot question, but how do you guys help couples, or what have you seen work well when it comes to, you know, managing your money as a couple, budgeting, and also being generous, right? Because, you know, God wants us to be generous people, and he wants us to be generous financially, right? And that can mean a lot of different things for people, but how do you help couples get on the same page with respect to giving?
Yeah, I think that definitely is a hard issue. I think you kind of have to begin teaching. I think it has to be a part of the culture that you surround yourself in. We always tell couples, it's like, hey, listen, your friends are going to change when you get married. Your single friends aren't going to come around as often, so it's important that you find, you know, great godly friends that are around you, people that are maybe farther along than you are. I think one of the things tangibly that we try to do here is we offer marriage missions trips so that couples can go out and serve together. I think we also offer different things where couples can serve together here, you know, in the church. So it gives them that opportunity to really go hand in hand in serving somebody else. I think that helps kind of bring that down into their heart. I think whenever we started doing marriage missions trips, we kind of made it a part to where they were going out and serving in the community and doing and partnering with who we were partnering with. But then we'd bring them back and say, okay, so what was that like for you in your marriage? Let's talk that through in your marriage. And how do we pass that on to your children, that heart of generosity? And so we try to do a couple of different options to help people, you know, build up in that generosity mentality.
Yeah. And we try to get them to understand the importance of tithing and how, you know, it's all God's anyway. He just wants 10%. That's pretty awesome that he doesn't want 100%, right? And just how blessed, you know, we like to share stories about just how much it's blessed us by giving, and how we can see, there was a time, gosh, early on in our marriage where we were really struggling. We stopped tithing, and it really changed. I mean, we saw it became worse, and we really struggled during that time. And I think it was just, I didn't even know. He didn't even tell me, because he handled the finances at the beginning. I didn't want to. Honestly, I know I didn't want to have anything to do with finances, because my mom did the finances in our family, and I saw how much she struggled all the time, and I was like, I don't want to have anything to do with that. So we were already off balance, because I didn't have anything to do with the finances, because we feel like it should be a team effort. It shouldn't be one person just handling it. Both should be involved and know what's going on. And so, I think you're okay with me sharing that. This was several years ago, but because we were struggling, he stopped, and I was, and it, became worse. And I was just like, what's going on? I've seen some credit card bills and different things. And he was just like, I stopped tithing, and I am feeling so guilty about that. And I know it's wrong, and we've got to start back. And I tell you, as soon as we started back, it was just, things started happening. We were able to pay some things off. We got on a budget, and just, but I tell you, there's such a blessing on that when you are giving to the Lord, and when you're tithing that first 10%, and when you're able to give more. It's amazing. I love hearing the stories of, Rick Warren is somebody that I listen to all the time. I mean, he gives, I think he's switched it now to where he gives 90% and he lives on 10%, and just how much the Lord has blessed him in that area, and with his book and everything. It's just, it's so remarkable. And so we always encourage couples, that especially in premarital counseling, make sure you're giving that first 10%. It will make a huge difference in your marriage and in your life.
Yeah.
100%.
So one last question from my side. If there's a couple that's really struggling, right? They're in that spot where things have just gone all wrong and they're really struggling. Like what kind of hope can you give them? Like, what have you seen? What are some of the things that have worked to get people out of that and into a really good spot financially, and therefore in their marriage?
I think realizing that, if you're struggling in any area in your marriage, realize that it probably took you a while to get to this place, and it may take a little bit of time to get out, but, take a step a day, take up one step, come to an agreement, with each other to say, okay, today, what can we work on? Today, what can we establish? And it's amazing how when you put a few steps together, you get to the end of a week, and maybe you're not where you want to be yet, but at least you're not back where you used to be. And I think when you can put a couple of those steps together, even in the area of financing, just evaluating where the expenses are going, what kind of budget can we put in place, what different resources could we put and learn from or glean from. I think when you begin to start taking those steps, things start happening, and God begins to bless the unity that you have together.
Definitely putting God first. We when we were going through our struggle in our marriage, we really leaned on Matthew 17:20, where Jesus is talking to the disciples, and he's saying, just with a mustard seed of faith, you can speak to that mountain and it will move. And so that's what we didn't have a lot of faith that our marriage was going to be okay, but we had a little bit of faith, and that's all God requires, is just a little bit of faith. Put him first, put a little bit of faith, and watch God move. Fast forward several years into our marriage, we had one daughter, and we were really praying to have another child. And we were praying, and I thought I was pregnant, and I found out that I actually had a cyst that I had to have surgically removed. Well, during that 1 month of time, my whole life, my insurance was really expensive. And
her husband had a great idea to get rid of her insurance and shop for some more. And it just happened a week later, she found out that
so in that 1 month of time of my whole life that I've never had health insurance, I was rushed to the emergency room and had to have emergency surgery. And so our bill was $40,000.
Over $40,000 in medical bills.
Yeah, and we did not have any resources to pay for this. And so I felt, it's funny the way, the enemy can attack you. Sometimes I felt like this was my fault. How could I have done this to our family when I had no control over it?
Right.
And so I remember we were in the dining room, and I was just weeping, and Clayton got on his knees, and he just began to pray over us. And he mentioned that scripture, Lord, with our mustard seed of faith, we're believing that you're going to pay this off. we don't know how it's going to happen, but we trust you. And so right after that, Clayton, his group of men that he was accountable to at the time, he just asked for them to pray. And one of them was a doctor. And he said, hey, call them, tell them you're going to pay cash and see what they'll do. He said, sometimes they'll bring down the price if they know you're going to pay cash and it's not going through the insurance company.
I said, I don't have cash.
Yeah, we're like, we don't have cash.
You're like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
And so I did, and it actually reduced it to about $20,000, which we still had nothing close to.
Yeah.
And then ultimately, over about a 2-week period, just praying, God supernaturally opened doors and ultimately paid it off within about 2 weeks.
We had a family member that paid for half and somebody from the church that paid the other half.
Wow.
I mean, and we didn't even ask. We just prayed. We were just praying and believing and trusting God with our little mustard seed of faith that he would take care of us. And he did.
Amazing.
So above budgets and above, talking about your finances, trust God, believe in him. So, if you need a miracle in your finances, if you are struggling like we were and you have just thousands and thousands of dollars in debt, of course, get on a budget, figure out how to get out of debt, but also trust God to help you. He's got supernatural blessings out there waiting to be used, but they can only be activated by our faith.
So good. I mean, you guys have got a beautiful story that you tell. Just by the way, just before we wrap up, where can people get the book? Because I feel like the book, like if this 30 minutes is any taste of what you guys have produced, I think people need to get a hold of that thing.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, they can get it anywhere books are sold. They can get it online, Amazon, Christian Books, Books A Million. We've heard great reports from literally around the world of people somehow getting a hold of it.
Yeah.
And it's really impacting and helping their marriage.
Yeah. It's called Hope for Your Marriage.
Hope for Your Marriage by Clayton and Ashlee Hurst. Guys, this has been a fantastic show.
Yeah.
And I know this is, we have all different kinds of people listening to the show. But I feel for sure this is going to really have some impact on some people. So I want to thank you so much for coming on today.
Thanks so much for having us.
It was an honor.
Really
Appreciate
great, guys. Yeah. So good. And people, the folks watching, folks on Facebook, YouTube, on the Tithely website, I mean, go grab the book, man. Help these guys spread the word.
Yeah. Absolutely. Hey, Frank, next week, we've got a really fun guest. They've been a partner of ours for a while.
That's right.
Terrific church planning network called Stadia.
Yep, Stadia Church Planning.
Yeah, and we got Michelle Parker on talking about all good things, church management, digital giving, church planting. It's going to be a really fantastic episode.
Yeah. Michelle, we've known Michelle for a long time, for a few years now, and she's at Stadia. They use Tithely Church Management for, I think, all of their church plants. And so she comes from the accounting side, but manages a bunch of that. And so it's going to be great to talk to Michelle and also talk a lot about like church plant fundraising. So it's going to be a good show.
Terrific. Awesome. Well, hey, everybody, thanks for listening. We love bringing the show to you. Appreciate taking out the time. God bless you. Have a fantastic week, and we'll see you next time. See ya.
Thanks, guys. See ya.